Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Hupp, Artistic Director at Syracuse Stage. Thanks for joining us. I'm here with Jonathan Spector. Jonathan is the author of Eureka Day. The first show at Syracuse Stage. We're thrilled to be back performing in front of a live audience with the show running through October 31. And Jonathan is here in Syracuse, coming to us from his hotel room. He's agreed to sit down for a few minutes to talk with us about the creation of Eureka Day and give us some insight into what we can expect when we see it, and sort of a little background to help enrich our experience after we've seen Eureka Day. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for joining me on this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I mean, it's so incredible to, after 19 months, however long it's been, to be able to sit in a theater with people and watch a play.
So we are recording this conversation after the second preview. We've had audiences now twice, and I've been thrilled with the response. We're learning from our audience and making adjustments to the play. The official opening for us, as we're recording this, is tonight, October 15. And so we've taken what we've learned from the audience over the last couple of days and continued to make tweaks and adjustments. And I have to say, talking to the actors, think about this. So these actors haven't been in front of a live audience for 19 months at the least, really. In fact, when you see the play at Syracuse Stage, you'll see Jason O'Connell playing the role of Don in Eureka Day. He played the role of Salieri in Amadeus, which is the play we were doing when the pandemic hit, and we closed public performances on March 13. 2020, right? 2020? Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I can lose track of time. But I want to go back in time, Jonathan, because this play, which seems so relevant to today, you wrote this play before the pandemic. Talk about your inspiration for writing this play. What was, and you're from, this play is set in the Bay Area. You're from the Bay Area in Northern California. But tell us about what led you to create Eureka Day.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly when it started. It was like, it might have even been 2015. Mm-hmm. There was a theater in the Bay Area in Berkeley called the Aurora, that I had a bit of a relationship with. And I think the way it started, there was this wonderful grant in the Bay Area that will pay for a theater to commission and produce a play by a local playwright. And so I think I had started a conversation with them about applying together for that grant, and that I had some vague idea of doing a play about vaccines. And then we did not get the grant, but they decided to commission the play anyway. And I, the curiosity or the spark of the play had just come from, moments that I had of being in conversation with people, friends or friends of friends in the Bay Area, people who were very, very smart, very well educated, and people who I had thought were just like me in their politics, in their sort of worldview. And then, it reached this moment in the conversation where you discover they don't vaccinate their kids, or they are, skeptical of vaccines. And, you sort of feel the floor dropping out from under you, because it seems so bizarre that somebody who you thought saw the world the same way you did could, in this one regard, kind of seem to live in a different universe. So that was super curious to me. And then I did a bunch of interviews with various people, people sort of who had different points of view on it, with some sort of public health doctors, all kinds of different people, and then started writing the play, I think in 2016. And then it was first produced in early 2018, and then it's had a couple of productions up until the pandemic hit. And yeah, it was very interesting to hear somebody last night saying that they couldn't believe this play was written before COVID, because in my mind it feels so much sort of the particular moment that it was written in. Because in so many ways, I think the conversation around vaccines has changed. It'd be so much of what was interesting to me about this as a subject was that it was an issue that was not particularly polarized politically, that there are people on the left who were skeptical of vaccines and people on the right who were skeptical of vaccines, and knowing somebody didn't vaccinate their kids didn't necessarily tell you about their politics. that has, I think, shifted quite a bit in the past 18 months. And now it is such a polarized issue. I mean, just yesterday I saw an article in the Washington Post about how, the percentage of Republicans who say they now support mandatory childhood vaccinations for the standard for MMR has dropped 20 points in the past 6 months, which is, very scary for all sorts of public health reasons, but also just a testament to how much the valence of this issue has shifted.
It's it's an interesting situation for Syracuse Stage as we promote the opening of our season in this new play, and this is the point in the conversation where the cats join my conversation, which they seem to always do. But how selling a show and say, well, what's it about? Well, it's about vaccinations and quarantines. And folks are like, oh, well, that's kind of the last thing I want to see right now. And then last night after the show, I had people come up to me and say, I'm so glad I saw this play because it's not what I expected. It's so much. It has taken on a richer life because I think of everything we've lived through in the last 18 months. And going back to the original, so it premiered at the Aurora Theater. Is that correct, Jonathan?
Yeah.
And that's a Bay Area theater.
Mm-hmm.
And you wrote a play about the Bay Area, and it premiered at a Bay Area theater. Did you ever think it was going to have a broader life beyond the San Francisco area?
I didn't know, because it was a commission for this theater in Berkeley, I was very intentionally trying to write a play that would feel very Berkeley, and wanting it to be a sort of a gift for that audience. And the people there responded to it very positively. But I remember while that production was happening, even though it was very successful, there was this question of like, well, is it, of course, everybody here likes it because it's about them and they're seeing themselves reflected on stage, but will anyone connect to it in any other, anywhere else? But it turns out, that as the old saw goes, the secret to, specificity is the secret to universality. And it has been, now there's a production. I don't think they're open yet. I think it's in rehearsal in Australia right now, and it's been done all around the country. So it turns out, I guess people do.
It first came to my attention when I read the review in the New York Times about the production that was running off Broadway in New York. I've never read such a glowing review. It instantly made me want to see the play, made me want to read the play. And with my fingers crossed, hopefully we wanted to be able to produce the play here. And at the time I thought, well, that's going to take years and years because it's going to have an amazing commercial run and it's going to run forever in New York and in London, and which it still, and I hope does. But the pandemic kind of derailed that a little bit, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are plans, and there are plans in the works for sort of commercial productions, which are still in the works, but
sure.
have been, it's sort of ironic that, as somebody was pointing out to me that, the productions have been delayed in part because of people not getting vaccinated. It's taken us longer to reach a point where things are coming back. But hopefully that's all still going to go forward.
So is the production at Syracuse Stage the first production in this, when we got it back into schedule, I thought I was going to be able to say post-pandemic era, but we can't say that right now. But in this sort of, ongoing pandemic era, is this one of the first productions back when theaters reopened?
It's the first, it's the first one. So it's very exciting.
So, and I know you've been to the preview performances. You've seen the performance. You've seen the audience react. How does the audience reaction differ from when you were seeing it pre-pandemic?
That's still something I'm trying to figure out. I think in the first act, it feels pretty much the same. And I think there is something that's a little bit different in the second act, which is where we kind of get more into the meat of some of the issues. And I do feel like there is something slightly different in the audience response, but I don't know. I've only had two chances to watch with an audience, so I'm not able to quite put my finger on what that is. But everybody does make people engage a little bit differently.
And in this early sort of thought process that you're engaging in, watching audience reacts, do you think you'll make, so far at least, have you thought about making any significant changes to the play?
Not, I mean, none in terms of updating it, for a moment. I think, anytime I watch the play, I am like, oh, maybe that line could be tweaked, so I can't shut off the part of my brain that wants to always make it better. But I don't think that's coming out of a sense of wanting to change it sort of for the.
And you did make a fairly substantial edit prior to the Syracuse stage production.
Yes, and it's been a thrill to see that. There for people who will see the show, Act 2 used to open differently. There used to be a scene that did not take place in the school at the top of Act 2, and have now shifted that so that it all takes place in one location, which I think works much better.
And I never saw the production with that scene in it, and just having read that scene and now this new version, I agree with you. I think the opening of Act 2 now works really well. Not that it didn't work well before, but I think in this sort of COVID era, that opening works really well. Going back a little bit in terms of your own background, Jonathan, was playwriting always the thing that you aspired to do? Was there? I know that you've lived in a lot of places. You've lived in New York City. Now you're on the West Coast. How did playwriting evolve for you?
Yeah, I had kind of a windy path to starting to write plays. I'd always written, but then I had started off, in college and out of college, wanting to be a director, or thinking I wanted to be a director, and spent a few years kind of kicking around New York, doing a lot of mostly assistant directing or directing things in tiny places that would go up for 2 nights. And then I moved to the Bay Area. I met the woman who's now my wife in the Lincoln Center Directors Lab, and sort of followed her to the West Coast, and was still directing, but I think I never, I don't know, it reached a certain point where it wasn't becoming clear it wasn't quite what I wanted to be doing. And then as one does, I sort of like had a little bit of a 30-year-old midlife, or 20, however old I was, midlife crisis, applied to law school, decided I should give up on theater. And then, in realizing I did not actually want to go to law school, started writing plays, and then have sort of been doing that since. And once I did, it felt much more like the, I don't know, the place I was always meant to be. Just took me a long time to get there.
Oh, I understand that. I think if you look at aspiring directors, if you search their files deep enough, you will always find an application to law school somewhere in everybody's file who tries their hand at directing. I think there's some point, and it's certainly in my past too. I can pull out some law school applications where you go, okay, well, I can swap one audience for the other. I can swap this audience for a jury. But I think that's something we all have in common. And the evolution of Eureka Day. There are 5 characters in Eureka Day, each with a very distinct personality. In crafting the play and deciding which voices you wanted to bring out. And one of the things that I've already heard from audiences that the play has a distinct point of view, right? I mean, we definitely understand. To me, the play is in some ways, a debate between individual choice and community good, which is an issue that is at the core of a lot of our public debate right now. And as you mentioned earlier in this conversation, it is intensely politicized. But here in New York State, we're seeing this play out with, when the governor mandates vaccines for public workers, and we find issues even in the healthcare industry where folks are reluctant to get a vaccine. I mean, there are so many different stories, and so many different points of view in this very contentious debate. And you bring those points of view out so clearly in the 5 characters that you've brought to life, each representing a different or slightly nuanced difference in their point of view. What was your thinking in terms of bringing these particular 5 characters to life?
It's a good question. I don't remember exactly what the genesis was. I mean, I know at a certain point in the development, I did want to make sure that everybody had a distinct point of view and was coming from a different place. And it was very, it was very, I think the way those characters developed was in some ways very much influenced by the actors who were part of the development. I had done a series of sort of readings and workshops with the theater that had commissioned it. And, I think a couple of the actors who ended up in that first production, were sitting around the table the first day that I brought in 50 pages of a script and, that was sort of boring and a mess. And so, what they were bringing to the characters very much sort of influenced how those characters developed. But then, it's very hard to reconstruct sort of the, what comes first in sort of the ways the characters unfold. But certainly there was a moment where I was trying to, to make sure I had clarity about, the distinct points of view of each character. And I think also very much this is, something I do in every play to lesser or greater degree, but, you have, particularly because this was a Berkeley play, I with each of you had somebody in mind that I knew who was sort of the model for each of these characters so that I could, sort of mold them around that.
And one of the characters that sort of holds the other characters together is the character of Don, the sort of headmaster of the private school. That character is played by the actor Jason O'Connell, who has done a lot of work at Syracuse Stage and who we're seeing in a new light in this production. And the character of Don really seems to be focused on sort of the financial underpinnings of the school and the survival of his own position. Do you see him as kind of like an everyman in this conversation? We don't see him take a strong side necessarily, although I guess by the end, by his silence, he's taking a side. But how about this character of Don? What's the origin there? Where did he come from?
I don't know exactly where he came from, but I know that in my very initial conception of the play, I thought it was going to be Don's play. I thought that sort of I don't know if I exactly knew how that was going to work, but that it would somehow, be a play about how he was, no longer like the right person for this to be at the head of this institution. And then as the play developed, it became clear, I love Don and he's a wonderful character, but the play is really much more about Suzanne and Karina. Or that they're the ones who are sort of driving the play more. But I think if the play is in some sense a tragedy, and the tragedy is sort of about the failure of an idea, the failure of the idea that as one friend of mine who's a critic, put it, that he thought of it as it's like a tragedy of the Obama years, of the failure of the idea that reasonable people on all sides can sort of come together and work things out, which was kind of the promise of Obama when he was going to rise above partisanship, of the fights of the 90s between Clinton and Gingrich. It's going to be a new era, and it turns out that I think what we learned is if one side is not interested in having a good faith engagement, then that principle doesn't work. That reasonable people can't come together in those circumstances. And I think Don in some sense is riding that is having to confront sort of the limitations of the tools that he has, and that has always worked for him before, of the ability to sort of bring people together and facilitate and find common ground.
Yes, I mean, the idea of come, let us reason together has been aspirational in our public body for many years, and it seems elusive and seems particularly elusive right now. You know, we know that the sort of the a big part of the play, particularly in the world we live in now, focuses on the issues you raise about vaccination and common good and sacrifice for the common good. But there's also, we have found in the conversation about the play, you also tackle racism. You tackle, the idea of who gets to own any conversation, or because we have very entrenched interests versus new interests. These characters display sort of passive and not so passive aggression towards each other at times, and whether that's sort of the sort of a racism that evolves because of the person's ethnicity, or sort of the gender of the character. Also, we find there's issues that we can latch on to in your play that transcend this issue of vaccination. And so that's one of the rich, I think the play is richly crafted, because even though the big ticket item, the thing we're all drawn to right now, is this debate about vaccination and quarantine and what's good for our children and what's good for all of us. But I also believe the play touches on so many other issues, and not in a way that we would necessarily expect, because these are all people that we think share a certain progressive point of view, but yet we see, in the course of their evolving dialogue and their conversations, issues that also are very prevalent in our national conversation today, about giving space and listening, and welcoming and really valuing the opinion of others. Was that those other issues, those deliberate choices on your part to sort of really broaden the impact of this play?
Yeah, I think it came out of, I mean, once I had landed on the idea that it was going to be a play about a school, about a progressive private school, connected then to this idea of like public good versus sort of individual rights or individual desires, is this idea, like these kind of schools, sort of progressive schools that center social justice in their mission. While I think that the conversation's changed a great deal over the past 18 months, there's sort of still a like fundamental contradiction in being, a private school with a very high tuition that's purports to have social justice as its sort of one of its primary missions, because those are necessarily exclusive and elitist places because of the financial structure, even if they have scholarship and bring in, adds, there's a limit to how much they can, actually, live the thing they claim to do. And so that contradiction, I think, is interesting, and is sort of the mirror image to the, I think the question about vaccines.
So as Eureka Day opens and as productions open around the country, like every playwright, you have other projects in the works and development. Are there any new plays on the horizon we can look for? Any other productions of Jonathan Spector plays on the horizon as theaters start to emerge in this new era?
Yeah, I have a new play that's going to premiere at Aurora in Berkeley, called This Much I Know, which is it's a little bit of a tricky play to describe, because it's several different storylines, but they all are connected around the question of what the difference is between the space between culpability and responsibility. So for instance, one of the storylines is about a woman who has accidentally killed someone in a car accident that was not her fault. And so there's that's a kind of event that you're not culpable for, but it's still a part of you. It's still, so there's another thread about the daughter of Joseph Stalin defecting to the United States. And sort of, it's kind of a big spiraling play with 3 actors who play a lot of different parts. And should be really fun. And then I have a new play that I'm working on that's a commission from South Coast Rep in Orange County, that's about a theater that is undergoing a leadership transition after their previous artistic director has been forced out for bad behavior. It's also like Eureka Day, a comedy with some teeth. And I think we're going to have a workshop of that next month. So I'm excited to dig in.
Well, I'm looking forward to all those plays, and I'm so honored that Syracuse Stage has the privilege of producing your play, Eureka Day, Jonathan, because you've given us permission to not only examine in a unique way our world around us and all the things that have been happening in the last year and a half that we haven't had an opportunity to come together in a theater and sort through an experience, but you've also given us permission to find the humor in these tough situations, and even in the most tragic situations, finding that humor allows us to process what we've been going through. And you've given us tools, and you've given us a fantastic blueprint, and combined with some amazing actors on the Syracuse stage, I think this story is particularly apt and particularly timely. And I'm so appreciative of your work and our opportunity to produce your work. And thank you also for your time today. It's been great to hear more and gain insight into your craft and into the background of this play, which I hope everybody has had the opportunity to see or will have the opportunity to see before it closes on Halloween. So Jonathan, thank you so much. Thanks for being in Syracuse with us, and best of luck with all of your new projects.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure being here.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.